welcome. If you are unfamiliar with freeCodeCamp, they are an international nonprofit that is dedicated to providing accessible tech education for everyone for free forever. They got a website over at freecodecamp.org, and you can check that out and you can sign up and start learning how to code today for free. We are freeCodeCamp Indy, which is the official local chapter in Indianapolis, Indiana, that's ran entirely by volunteers. We offer help for beginner to intermediate programmers. We provide a supportive community for learning and career transitioning, and we like to host events to encourage collaboration and learning how to work as a team, such as hackathons and project days and talks and workshops. We are on meetup.com, so you can find our future live events published there. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel. We do a talk every month from different speakers, so we'll be posting those on here if you want to subscribe to see those in the future. The following talk was recorded in front of a live audience on January 26th, 2022 in Indianapolis, Indiana at the Machyne makerspace. The talk was also streamed live over Zoom. This talk is titled Career Advice for Self-Taught Developers. It was given by myself, and unfortunately, the introduction for this talk was not recorded, so we begin already in progress. So here's the plan. We're going to go over some getting started resources and stuff, portfolio advice, resume advice, project advice, interview advice, career paths, and then we'll take some questions at the end. I did look through all the people RSVP'd, and about half of the people had meetup interest for web development, and about a quarter had just general programming or coding, which just means that they've not done enough stuff to really get deep into this yet, so they're just looking for general advice. And then about 5% was data science, which is interesting. You don't really see a lot of that show up at the freeCodeCamp meetups. And then the rest was just people who didn't fill out the form. So I guess you're all really cool people because too busy to fill out internet forms. So I'm going to do some specific stuff to web dev because we've got a lot of those people who RSVP'd, but I'm also going to try and keep it fairly broad and open. So getting started, here is a getting started link for you, fcci.cc/getting started. This has a whole bunch of links if you want to learn HTML or CSS or SAS or JavaScript or Vue or UX. There's a whole bunch of links. At the very top, there is a video for the 2022 web dev, like big picture zoom out the entire field and all of that for everything related to web development. And that video is 90 minutes long, and it will save you thousands of hours if you watch it. So I've marked that as mandatory viewing. You should watch it. But every link on there is really good. I've started doing HTML in the 90s, so I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm always on the lookout for really, really, really good tutorials and learning resources. So this is a fairly short list of each of these sections. There's less than 10 in each section. So this is the best of the best of the best that I'd be recommending. So if you're into web dev, that is your resources to look out for. All right, let's go into portfolio advice. First off, keep it simple. You don't need to go crazy on this. I see a lot of people, big mistake I see, especially with new people, is that their portfolios are, they kind of get a little bit tangled up in thinking their portfolio needs to look amazing and be this cool work of art. No one cares. Put that effort into your projects. You can literally just have a blank page with your name on it, a link to your GitHub and your LinkedIn, and then a bulleted list of your projects. I just want to see your best 3 or 4 projects. That's it. If it's a bulleted list of plain text that links to your projects, that's good enough. If you want to turn them into little icons, that's fine. If you want to do screenshots, fine. None of that's needed though. Just a list is all I care about. And if you want to show more than your best 3 or 4 things, that's fine too. Put it in another section below that and list all the rest of your junk. But I really just want to see a section right at the top with a link to stuff. Don't worry about having a giant splash screen video with your name and parallax scrolling and all that stuff.
just keep it simple. Put that effort into other projects. Your projects are what I care about. And ideally, I'd like to be able to see the code that you did on those projects as well. So that's your quick portfolio advice. Resume advice. I actually have a full hour-long talk on resumes, so I'm going to try to breeze through a lot of high-level points here because we got a bunch of stuff to get through in this kind of, career thing that we're going over. But this is sort of what your resume should look like, roughly like this. And we're going to go section by section on here, starting with the header. You want your name up here, nice and big, where that is. Underneath your name, you want the job title you are applying for. So whatever they put as the job title for the app, that's what you put on your resume under your name. It shows that you self-identify as that role that they are looking for, that you're not some hobbyist or a jack of all trades or whatever your current job title is. No. You are exactly what they are looking for. It also shows that you customize your resume for this job. You're not just shotgunning it out to everybody. And then over here at the other part of the top of the header, you want to have your contact information, your email, your phone number, your portfolio, and then the portfolio will have your links to your LinkedIn and your GitHub and the rest of that stuff. But just the portfolio is fine. And then if you are applying for a position that is remote or it will allow relocation, then you can also put Indianapolis, Indiana, or whatever your city and state is, to let them know that you're local and applying for this position, or that you are remote and what that entails. So yeah, that's the header. Technical skills. So this part of the resume, this physical part of the page that comes right after the header, people who work on resumes professionally, who write resumes for other people or edit people's resumes, they call this the most expensive real estate. The thing that comes right after the header is the most important part on the page, so the most important thing should go there. And the most important thing on your resume is the technical skills. Unless you are just getting out of college or you're like in college right now, then down here at the bottom, this education section, just move that up to the very top because that puts the rest of your resume in context. Then people realize, oh, you've been in school for the last 4 years. That's why you've worked at Jimmy John's for the last 4 years. You're just making some extra cash on the side. This is why you don't have a whole lot of professional experience because you were in school. This is why you're listing the classes you were in and such, or these school projects. This makes a lot more sense. So it just puts the rest of the thing in context. But otherwise, your technical skills are the most important thing and they should go right at the very top. So let's dive into these. Ideally, what you want to do is get out a piece of paper and write down every single skill that you have and every technology you are familiar with or have even played around with a little bit. Just write them all down and then try to find similar stuff and group things together on that piece of paper, and get a new piece of paper and rewrite the stuff in little groups, circle them up, give them a category name. Once you've done that, on your resume, what you want to get this down to is 3 to 5 bullet points. And you want to have at the front of each line, that category name in bold. And then after that, a comma separated list of those particular technologies or skills. So here's an example. You don't need to copy this exact same thing or use these exact same category names. Just think through what makes sense for your skill set. But this is so useful. This is a super useful part of your resume. The reason why is that the 3 types of people who are going to look at your resume are HR people or tech recruiters. So recruiters or people in HR, dev managers, who would be like your boss, the person who's responsible for actually hiring you, and then a senior dev or a lead dev, usually the most experienced person on the team that you would end up working on. So those are kind of the 3 people who will end up looking at your resume, and they're all different groups that have different goals in mind. The HR people aren't going to know what any of these silly made-up words are. They don't know what a jQuery is. They don't know what an Agile or a Vite or an Escalent or a Babel or Webpack. They don't know what any of this nonsense means, and they don't care. That's not their job. Their job is to hire the janitor. Their job is to hire the senior VP of sales and marketing. Their job is to hire the front-end web developer. They don't need to know all the jargon of each of those people's jobs. They will have a list of good words and bad words. So someone, usually the dev manager, will write up a list of here's the kind of stuff we want to see on a resume. Here's the kind of stuff that would be a red flag, where it doesn't necessarily mean that you wouldn't get called in for an interview, or you wouldn't get looked at. It just means if there's a lot of red flags, that's not good. And if there's very few good words on there that they are looking for, then that's you get passed up during the resume phase. So the dev manager is the only one who's actually really going to read the whole resume and understanding of this stuff, because if they make a bad hire, it's really on them. So they're going to read through it all. The senior or lead dev who's going to look at it is not going to look at it. They're going to be super busy. They're going to be working on the hardest stuff on the project and have the hardest deadlines and be the most busy person. So they're going to be sitting at their desk with your resume printed out from that morning that their boss gave them and said, hey, look this over. And they will not have touched that. And then they'll be told, oh, that person we're interviewing is in conference room B. And they say, oh, right, crap. And they pick up the piece of paper and they skim over it as they walk from their desk to conference room B. You get tops 5 seconds, 5 seconds tops of them looking at your resume. So it's really important to be able to skim down and across in these sections, which is why you shouldn't have any of these spill over onto more than one line, because that interrupts that visual parsing, that visual flow. And this, I can quickly skim over this and say, okay, Vue.js, accessibility, relational databases, Node, web package. Oh, hi, nice to meet you. I see you worked at XYZ. What was that like? That's interesting. Tell me about that. Right? That's all you get. You get like 5 seconds tops. So skimming over this is really good. The other thing that makes this really useful is that you have a whole word cloud of all your technologies, all the good words they're looking for in a resume. So that means when we get to the professional experience section, you can talk like a human. How crazy is that? You don't have to say, achieved this by using React and functional programming with machine learning and Redux in a fully capacitated, oh God, help, kill me. Oh, it's awful. No, just talk like a human because you don't need to shove in all these keywords. You did that at the top. You've got a whole word cloud of keywords up there. Now you can just talk like a person. So that's really nice. Professional experience, 2 to 4 companies, 2 to 5 bullet points each. Keep it relevant. Everything about your resume is relevancy to the position you're applying for. This is another big mistake I see people do. I often am given someone's resume to review and give them critique on, and they will have bullet points for where they worked, and they'll have a bullet point that is so beautifully worded, so well crafted, elegant, and has nothing to do with this position. Get rid of it. Take it off your resume. I know you spend a lot of time making that beautiful sentence, and it conveys so much so well. Doesn't matter, don't care, get rid of it. The first bullet point for each of these jobs should say what your actual literal job was that you did there. And then every bullet point after that should be something relevant to the position you're applying for. And if you only have 1 bullet point, that's fine. It just says that's what you did there. And then ideally you can find something relevant in a 2nd or 3rd bullet point. Avoid breaks in work. This is stuff that people in HR will look for. They'll look for breaks in work. They'll care if you can hold down a job for more than a year, that kind of stuff. It's not the end of the world if you do have a break in your work experience. Just be prepared to answer a question as to why that break there. Why is that there? I was working a different job at the time that I didn't list on here because it is completely not relevant at all. I just took another job, and all of these other jobs are relevant, so I just skipped that one. Or I went back to school, or I went to Europe for a year, or whatever. I don't know. Whatever you did, just have an excuse for that part. General advice: don't put responsible for a bunch of times. That's a really common thing people do. A better thing is to say accomplished X by doing Y. So that shows what you accomplished, not just that you did something. Instead of responsible for Y, say accomplished X by doing Y. You can also put work while in school. That's cool too. Cool. Other experience. So on your resume, I like to have these 3 little sections at the bottom. This is projects that you've done or things that are relevant to this industry or your career that you can show off that aren't your professional experience. They're not stuff you got paid for. So this can be personal projects. These can be resume or portfolio projects. We'll talk more about those in the next section. These can be open source projects that you've contributed to or created. You can talk about running a meetup. I saw several data science people RSVP. There's no data science meetup here in Indianapolis. Maybe one of you can do that. You don't need to be an expert. I started the Vue.js meetup because I learned the basics and I wanted to learn the more advanced stuff, and I wanted to go to a meetup to learn that, and there wasn't one, so I just made it. You will find that running a meetup makes you a lot more knowledgeable about basically everything on that topic. You can also put in the other experience section that you gave a talk. You can talk to Anya. She's running this meetup here, and you can give a talk here in the freeCodeCamp Indy. It doesn't have to be a little pro tip for you. You don't need to write down that you gave an hour-long talk or it was a 5-minute talk. You don't need to mention how long the talk was. You can just say you gave a talk somewhere. You can also list volunteer work, especially if it's relevant in some way. Like Coder Dojo is a nonprofit group that teaches kids 10 to 18 how to do coding, and you can volunteer there. So you can look for Coder Dojos in your area and volunteer your time to help kids learn about code, or do really anything else that's volunteer work-wise. But these are all the kind of things that you can think about putting in the other experience section. If every item in this section is the same thing, like you have 3 open source projects, then don't call it other experience, call it open source projects, or call it personal projects, or community, something like that if you're running meetups and giving talks and stuff, tech community or something. Cool. And then education, pretty straightforward. I think you know what to do in this section. I'm not going to go into that. Cool. Project advice. So I have another talk called How to Finish the Project You Start. And so I've stolen a few things from there for this. I have since 2014 was when I finished my first really big coding project. It was like 9 months of working on one project. Since then, I have gone on to complete somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 projects. So a lot. I've not start projects, not had ideas and then worked on a little bit and then left it. No, actually finished, completed, did a release, have done multiple releases. So I've done hundreds of those at this point. So this is some advice from someone who used to never finish projects and now has become a serial project completer. In the time that I've been doing this, I have found that there are 3 types of projects. I have given this talk a bunch of times, and I've had people come up to me afterwards, and I've discussed ideas around it. And I've only ever had one person suggest a 4th type. I reject that one because I feel like that's a good way to not finish the projects that you start. But these 3 represent different ideas and different goals. So an academic project, the goal of this is to learn something new. It's not to impress anyone. It's not to show anything off. It's not to, do something you're passionate about or care about. It's just to learn something new. So when I'm working on a passion project, which is the kind where I'm really engaged, this is something I genuinely care about, and I will spend a lot of time on it. And there's no real deadline on it. It's just a thing that I think should exist. So I'm going to spend my time to work on it. When I'm working on that, I will often hit a roadblock that prevents me from moving forward. And the only thing I can do is go and learn a new thing. So what I do is I create a new project, and then I go and learn that thing in the new project. And then when I'm done and I've learned it, I delete it. Academic projects are disposable. They are throwaway. You get in, you learn whatever you need to, and then you get out and you throw it out. And this is super useful because if you try to learn something new in your passion project, you're going to spend a bunch of time trying to incorporate some new technology into your project and try it out and see if it works in there. And there's going to be a lot of integration steps to get that to work. and a lot of trial and error to figure out what the technology actually is, and also some polish because it's a project you care about, so you don't want to just hack it together and make it look bad. So you're going to put all this extra effort into it, and then you may get to the end of that and then realize, oh wait, I'm not going to use this technology here. This actually kind of sucks. I don't want to use this in my project. Now you have to go back and rip all that stuff out. And this is just feels like way more effort when you could have just done it in a throwaway project that has no polish. No one's ever going to see it because you know you're going to just delete it when you're done. Doesn't need to look good. I just use nonsense words whenever I do this stuff. I'm not trying to like create a cool thing that's use one of my cool ideas. It's 100% disposable. Go in knowing that, get done. The other problem is if you're doing this on your passion project, it feels like you're making progress. It feels like you're putting all this time into your project you care about, and then you get to the end and all you've done is learn some new thing. And it feels like you're putting in all this effort into your passion project and you're not actually making any real progress on it. And it's because you aren't. You're not working on your passion project. You're doing an academic project inside of it. And that's just you'll get burnt out. Your motivation will fade because you're not making progress in relation to the effort put into the project. And so there's just a ton of reasons why you want to separate this thing out. The resume project, I skipped over that one. This is just a small, short project, ideally 1 or 2 weeks of effort. And this is something that you use to impress someone else. You have the whole point is to make someone else impressed. That's it. So I may see a company is using some technology I haven't heard of before, and I want to work there. So I'm going to make a short little project to impress them and learn that new technology. I'm only going to pull in one new technology I'm unfamiliar with because it's so scoped to such a short period of time. If I pull in more and more stuff I don't know about, the risk of me failing to finish the project goes up dramatically, right? Because there's just too many variables of stuff I'm not familiar with. But that's the point of it. And you can apply this to coding. You can apply this to anything. Here, I want to make a movie. I'm going to do a short film first as a passion project to convey the idea of the movie, so I can then take that to the movie studios and pitch this and say, here's the short film or the trailer for the movie I want to make. Give me the funding. I may say, ooh, I want to try a fisheye lens. I've never done that before. I'm going to do an academic project where I just film my cat on the table, or a bowl of fruit, or running up and down the stairs, and with shaky cam, and just try a bunch of different stuff with a fisheye lens to learn. Okay, doesn't work well in low light, doesn't look good with shaky cam. Surprisingly, cats look amazing with fisheye lens, and still well lit stuff in the daytime looks really good. So you can learn stuff, right? And then I may keep some notes of like focal lengths or something that I could use on my real project. But other than that, I'm going to throw that footage out if I don't need it. I don't care. It's just throwaway stuff of fruit and running up and down stairs. Who cares, right? It has no story value. So this works with anything. Same thing. You want to clean your garage, or you want to clean just enough of your house to allow somebody to come over that you want to impress. This is what my mom would call shift the shit. You just move it to a different room out of view. Or academic, you want to learn some new cleaning products, something. So that's how basically every idea I've ever had for projects falls into one of these categories. It's not just a code thing. It works for literally anything. Okay, defining scope. So you want to create a list of all the ideas you have for your project, break down the bigger ideas into smaller tasks, sort them by priority. I would actually split them into 3 groups. Buckets. Well, there's a whole bunch of people who suggest similar ideas and they have different names for it. I like to call them need to have, want to have, and nice to have. And I just put all my ideas in those buckets. And then, that need to have step is usually like your MVP. Also create a list of supplemental work. So if I am making a Android app, do I need a website for my app so people can go to the website to learn more about it? That's supplemental work. Do I need to do tutorial videos or demo videos? That's supplemental work. It's not actually working on the app. It's working on stuff around it. Do I need to do marketing material or advertising this thing? All of this stuff that goes into it. Do I need to do documentation and write those things up? All of that goes in the supplemental work section. So create a list of all that that's going to need to be done. Tasks requiring skill sets you don't have should be replaced with creative alternatives that will work as a stand-in. If I wanted to make a animated movie and I can't draw or animate, I'm not going to be able to get that project done. So I should find an alternative. Can I do stop motion instead? Can I do claymation? What about live action with some low budget After Effects, special effects thrown in or something? How can I do this movie with the skill sets I have? How can I work on this project with the skill sets I have? Try to find pre-made boilerplate stuff if you can that stands in the areas where you are lacking in skills. So you're not good at design. Is there some design kit you can pull in and use instead? Phases. So if you're working on a passion project, there are different phases for it. Phase 1 is your need to have. We talked about this a moment ago. It's your minimal viable product. Ideally, when you're making that list of stuff, you want to go through that need to have section and move everything you can out of that section to other areas. You want to be able to, if possible, can you move this into the want to have section and just strip this down? Here's an example. I want to make a Mario video game. Everybody knows Super Mario Brothers, right? Do I need the little turtle guys, the Koopas? Do I need those in the game? If I remove them, would it still be a Mario game? Yeah, I think so. I think if you run, I think that's fine. Okay, what about jumping? Could I remove jumping? Not really. I think you kind of need running and jumping. That's the whole thing, right? So you want to strip stuff out and be like, okay, do I need this power up? Do I need these enemies? Not really. Strip it all down to the bare bones MVP, and you basically have a little square running around and jumping and maybe a pit to fall in and die and respawn. And that's about it, right? So then once that's good and that's fun and that's working, the core concept is good, then you can add in other stuff. And you can say, okay, let's start adding in blocks you can break. Let's start adding in pipes you can go down. Let's start adding in enemies you can jump on. And let's make a list of all the cool enemies we want to do. Let's do like 50 enemies and 50 power-ups, right? And then you get to a point where you've done like 8 enemies and like 4 power-ups and you haven't done the rest. Who cares? Your game is already fun. It already works. You can literally stop at any point and say, it's done. I can release this as is. And you can move on. And that's why we put the supplemental phase next. So the supplemental phase is all of that extra stuff. And this is things that, all the things surrounding it. And the reason why this comes next is that the stuff you really want to do, the project you really want to exist, you're going to have a lot of motivation to work on that. But if your brain is telling you, I don't want to do any of the supplemental stuff, well, you need the supplemental stuff for the project to actually be finished, right? Like, these are all things you need. If it needs documentation, you need to do that at some point. If you need to set up a community, a Discord, a subreddit or whatever, a Twitter or whatever, you need to do those things at some point for this project. You knew that was something that would need to be happen. If you don't want to work on those, then you need to ask yourself, is this really worth your time to keep putting more stuff into this project? If it's not worth your time to do the supplemental things, why is it worth your time to work on this project at all? Because you're not going to finish it. So just wrap up what you've done, move on to the next project and work on that. After you've done the supplemental work and you've added in the want to have stuff, if you skip through all of that, then you go to the nice to have. That's the cool extra features that really aren't needed. They're not necessary at all, but you can add those things in. I should also mention that these slides, I'm going to give you a link to the slides at the end so you can have access to all this stuff. Yeah, and then after that, if you run out of all the nice to have stuff, then you're just basically done. You're in maintenance mode, maintenance and upkeep. So bug fixes, maybe some feature requests people have, just keeping the project alive for a while. And then eventually you get to phase 6, which is Phoenix, where you either sunset or deprecate the project, where the project's done and you're not going to work on it ever again. And you just archive it and say, hey, it's out there if you want to do it, but I'm not gonna fix anything. I'm not gonna work on this anymore. There you go. This is what you get. Or you decide, actually, I do want to keep working on this, but I started this years ago and I'm so much better now. And all this that is built on top of is just terrible in comparison to what I can do now. I want to start from scratch and rebuild this project from scratch with all my new skills and new knowledge that I didn't have 5 years ago when I started the project or whatever. So that's the Phoenix, where you're either done with the project, you're never going to touch it again, or you're going to start a whole new project from scratch and pull over the ideas from the original, but maybe not any of the code, or maybe some of it, see what you can salvage. So that's the different phases of the project. Notice this is for a passion project. Doesn't really make sense to do this on a resume project, right? Because resume project is basically just phase one. That's it. It's just a really short 1-2 week project, maybe a few extra days of polish at the end, but you're not really going crazy with it. A resume project should look like it works. It should look like it's done, but it doesn't actually have to be done. It can be more like a proof of concept or a demo. It should just look finished. It doesn't actually have to be. Interview advice. So getting your first dev job, it's really hard. It's the hardest thing any dev ever does, and it's because you are a huge risk. If you've never had a dev job before, why would I hire you versus someone else who has more experience? Because I don't know if you can do the work. If you have had a dev job before, then someone else took that risk on you, and you worked there for a year or whatever, then I know, you didn't get fired in that year. You clearly can do the work, so you're safe bet. I can hire you. Otherwise, I may pull you in. I don't know, if you're actually capable of doing the work or not. It's not uncommon to come into a code base at a job that is a big code base, and everyone knows that when you start off there, it's going to be at least 3 months before you start being productive. It's just a big code base. It takes a long time to kind of, pick up the steam and learn your way around and be able to change things. So if I hire a new dev and I'm not super savvy at coding, and I know that all the developers who come in tell me that it takes like 3 months to learn the code base, how do I know if you're getting anything done or not? If you know what you're doing? Maybe I'm paying you for 3 months of work and I get a month of actual productivity out of you. Maybe I hire you for a year and I pay you 12 months of pay, and I got 3 or 6 months out of that, whereas I should have gotten at least 9 from someone competent. I don't know, and it's hard to tell, and nobody likes to fire someone, and it's difficult to tell if they're actually doing well or not, if it's just the code base is hard, or if they're just really way slower than they should be. You don't know. So it's really hard to find someone who will take the risk and hire a dev for their first dev job. So the best thing I recommend is prove that you can do the work and that you can finish projects, work on projects, prove that you can do the work. And also prove that you can hold down a job for more than a year. If I'm going to hire you for 12 months and get 9 months out of you and then you quit, that's a pretty bad return on investment, But if I hire you and you work for me for 2 or 3 years, then those first few months of you not being super productive, that kind of is a wash compared to the rest of the productivity I got out of you. So yeah, once you do get your first dev job though, keep it for at least 1 to 2 years before moving on, and you'll no longer be seen as a risk, and you can easily find more jobs because there's just not enough programmers in the world, and people need programmers, so you won't have any issue finding another job if you're no longer a risk. Interview advice. Go in with the goal of learning and networking. This is the biggest mistake I see people have. They go in with the goal of getting a job, and statistically, you're not going to get a job. There's just more people applying, and you're just, only one of them gets the job. Even if it's a small pool of maybe 6 people, you still have a 1 in 6 chance. That's not great odds. Your goal should be to just make a good impression on the people you're talking to, and to make them like you and remember you for the future, and to make that expand your network. When I asked other people in the industry for what advice they would give, because I was doing this talk, I wanted to also pass along what other people's thoughts were. One of the quotes I got from someone was, your network is your net worth. At least 50% of this stuff is being social. Social skills is 50% of this. I think that's maybe overestimating, and there's just so much tech you have to learn so many technical skills, but social skills are definitely important. And if you come in and interview for a position and someone else better applies, I'm going to hire that other person. But if I'm hiring people again a year from now and you apply again, and I remember you and I like you from the last time, and I can see how much you've grown in a year, I can see the extra projects you finished, the newer technologies you've learned. I can see that growth. Even if someone who is a little bit better than you applies, I'm more likely to hire you because I have a connection with you and I've seen that you have a lot of drive and you've got that hard work. I'm more likely to go with you than the better candidate because I know you, right? So that's why the networking stuff is important. Also, you should be focusing on the questions they're asking and how you're responding and how you can improve. So you should do a little retrospective after the interview. Sit in your car and think about, what are things I could have handled better during that? And that prepares you for the next interview you do. And you'll just keep getting better. It just takes practice to get good at anything. Same is true with interviews. Be honest and say, I don't know. If they ask you a question, don't try to just bullshit your way. You're not going to fool them. They know the answer. Just say, I don't know. Just be honest about it. And ask them, what is the answer? Try to learn in this moment. Try to get them to teach you something. People like teaching, and people like those that they teach. If people end up liking their students. Whiteboarding sucks. This is 100% a fact. This will never not be true. A lot of places have switched to take-home assessments, which is a far better way of checking if someone knows how to code. But still, a large amount, maybe the majority, still does whiteboarding, and it sucks. You have to do live coding in front of them. Just practice that. Practice live coding with someone watching you, and don't freak out. So many people freak out and they forget their own name when they have to whiteboard, and they just don't know what they're doing, and they just blank. So all you can really do is just really practice a lot, and especially try to find people who can watch you while you're coding and ask you questions while you're doing it. They don't even need to be knowledgeable. Like, you can have your mom watch you and she can just ask questions and say, well, what's the point of that? Or why are you doing that? And then you just have to explain what you're doing while you're doing it. And that gives you that practice. But yeah, that's it. Whiteboarding sucks. And then when you're done, reflect on how you can improve. Cool. Getting a job. So we talked about why it's hard to get a job. Let's talk about what I would be doing if I'm trying to hire someone. So the things that are going to get you the job. First off is skill. There's three things, really. Skill is the first one. Can you do the work, or do I think you're smart enough to figure it out after I hire you? That's just the general vibe. Can you do the work? I need people who can do the work. There's just not enough people. Can you do it? That's where finishing projects is really helpful. It proves that you can do the work. And then conversely, did anyone who can do the work better than you apply? That's completely out of your control, right? So keep that in mind when you're interviewing at places. If someone better applies, that's not within your control. Don't fear getting rejected. It's just part of the process. Personality is a big thing. If I get two people who are equal in skill level and one of them is very dry and seems like they'd be a very boring person to work with, or they're like really super chipper and I really just wouldn't want to sit next to them every Monday morning before I have my coffee, your personality matters. Be charming during your interviews. Come across well. Really think about that during your interview. Be the kind of person that other people want to sit next to Monday morning before they've had their coffee. And then the third big thing of getting a job is nepotism. Straight up, you can be the best person who applied. You can have the best personality of everyone who applied. But if the boss's nephew also applied, you're not getting the job. If my best friend is also applying, you're not getting the job. Similarly, if you build up your network, then you can slowly get a little bit of that nepotism bump where somebody knows you a little bit more. I'm gonna be honest with you, every person I have hired, I have met through a meetup event. I have gone to a local meetup tech event and hired them through that process, except for in the last year, we hired someone remotely who was out of state. But every other person that I've hired, I have met them through a meetup because I find really passionate people there. And I get to talk to them outside of work, outside of the professional environment, and get to learn more about their personality, tell them all of the dirty secrets of where I work so they know what they're getting into, and let them know what to expect. So that can work in your favor. But these are the three things that matter. Can you do the job? Do you have a good personality that meshes well? And who do you know? That's it. And a lot of the stuff is out of your control. If nepotism works against you, that's out of your control. If someone more experienced, that's out of your control. All you can do is just keep improving your skill and keep improving your interview skills as well for your personality and network. These are all you can do to improve these different areas. But mainly just keep getting better. Be so good they can't ignore you. All right, career path advice. So we're towards the end here. I'm going to go over different job levels, roles within our industry, different fields that are available, and web dev job roles in particular. We'll dive into those specifically because I saw a lot of people were interested in web dev. So job levels, there is quite a range. You can be an apprentice, an intern, associate, junior, a mid-level or mid developer. Not really a good term for that. A senior, a lead, an architect, and it kind of goes in this order. At some places, associate is just another word for junior. They use them interchangeably. That's a thing you'll see. Apprenticeships are absurdly rare. You'll almost never find them. It's usually a very, very big company like Google or Microsoft will do an apprenticeship, and it varies quite a bit. But they are looking generally for people who are career transitioning, not people who are just in college or just out of college. They're looking for people who are further on in their lives and they're trying to switch to this industry, do a career transition. And there will be at least some level of training, maybe a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. In some cases, there'll be even like 3 months of just coming in and training and learning. And then you'll be given basically the kind of work an intern would be given. Interns are almost exclusively internships are for people who are in college or just about to graduate or just graduated. It's very much targeted at those people. And also fairly rare, not as super rare as apprenticeships, but internships are fairly rare. And they'll expect you to have at least some baseline knowledge and be able to give you some basic projects to work on out of the box. An associate is sort of you don't have, just like an intern, you don't really have the skills really to do the job. But rather than being specific to a role, you're more general and you could basically do anything and they'll just throw any work at you and you're expected just to do this stuff. A junior will be more specific to a specific role. You are a junior developer, you're a junior UX, you're a junior whatever, So that's more specific and that's more of like, you're actually doing the job. You're just expected to not be as experienced and to be a little bit slower and to need more hand-holding and guidance. But for the most part, you can do the job on your own and get work done without, a lot of supervision. A mid is someone who is graduated from that junior level and they can take on pretty much any task. They are your workhorse. They can just get through do any job that you throw at them for that's expected of them. And they should be able to be fairly knowledgeable within the stuff they're doing. Seniors should be far more knowledgeable. They should know about the really weird, obscure thing that only happens once or twice a year. And they should also be mentoring the people beneath them, the junior or mids. A lead or team lead will be someone who's worked on the team for a long time. They have even more responsibility and they may do some leadership roles. In some teams, on a smaller team that doesn't have a project manager, they sort of stand in for that role as like managing the tickets and the team and like doing one-on-ones as kind of a dev manager-esque thing. It just sort of depends on the company and the size of the team. And an architect is generally someone who works across multiple teams and solves these more rare issues, like setting up a boilerplate for a project, a thing that, you set up a project once and it's good for years. They may be the person doing a lot of cross stuff for that, or dealing with parts of the tech stack that the team isn't skilled up to do. You may have a lot of really good front-end developers and one decent back-end developer, but nobody is really familiar with Docker or containers, or the DevOps side of things, or the continuous integration and setting up Jenkins or whatever. Then the architect can come in and help the team out for those sort of tasks, to help them with those things. Roles. We do not have time to go into all of these things, but I thought I would show them at least, so that at the end of this talk, I can put these slides back up and people can ask questions if there's particular roles that they're interested in. Similarly, there is the fields slide here with lots and lots of fields that we can talk about. If people have questions on any particular ones, I'll just quickly read off the roles. Business analyst, a DBA or database administrator, DevOps, developer operations, DevRel or developer relations, documentation, technical writing, freelance, management, which goes from Scrum Master all the way up to Dev Manager, QA, QE Manager, Project Manager, Product Manager, and Director. Quality assurance or quality engineer, a QA or a QE, a recruiter or technical recruiter, security analysts, site reliability engineer or an SRE, software developer engineer for any type of application, a web app, a mobile app, a desktop app, whatever. Tech support, and then user experience or UX, and there's different types of UX. There's researchers, there's designers, and there's also UX developers as well. Ooh, lots of roles in this industry that you can pick from. And then there's a lot of fields you can go into. This is mostly alphabetized, except I moved the bottom one over just to fit everything onto one screen. Artificial intelligence or machine learning, AI, ML, blockchain, Ethereum, smart contracts, NFTs, all that junk. Data science, for all those data science people who are in attendance tonight. Data analyst, data engineer, business intelligence analyst, machine learning engineer. Those are all parts of data science. Embedded systems, which is where you are writing code at a machine level, you're writing right to the metal. Game dev, mobile dev, a no-code developer. We got web apps for front end, back end, full stack, and UX, and we'll talk about that in the next slides. Mechanical engineering, which is just a whole other thing that's like a whole different degree from computer science, and that handles stuff related to programming, but you kind of use programming with a bunch of other skill sets, from everything from hardware development to electrical electronics engineering, industrial engineering, automotive, robotics, aerospace, biomedical, all that stuff. Website design, website development, and CMS stuff, virtual reality or augmented reality or VR, AR, XR, those things. And then we got web dev roles, job roles. Here's sort of a way to think about how these things relate. We've got on one end, this little yellow dot is your UX research, and these are people who talk directly to your end users and ask them questions and get feedback as to what things that they want out of the product that you're working on, or compared to this or this, how hard is it to find this thing or to do this task, or that kind of stuff. They also do competitive research. They'll look at other products that you're competing companies that you're against. How do they do things, and try to learn from that. So that's your research people, and then they will take all that research and knowledge, and they will put that all into a bunch of data that you can then use to make good design decisions. You have data-driven design. Your UX designers, here's this little green dot. These are people who are not necessarily doing the aesthetic visual design of choosing the padding and the color and the how round the borders are on stuff, that kind of thing. They're usually more thinking higher level. What is the information architecture for this this project that we're working on? How do we make navigation easier? How do we make the task the user is trying to do simpler and more intuitive? And how do we remove the number of steps it takes to do that task? What patterns exist in an interface that we could use to simplify this? What ideas are out there? So that's sort of their main focus. There's also the part of design that is purely visual, where after all of that is decided, then you actually go in and decide, okay, what's the border color going to be, or what's the font size, that kind of stuff. The nitty gritty design stuff where you're, measuring things by the pixels. You have a UX developer, which is this nice teal color. It's kind of halfway between a front end and a UX design. This is someone who is knowledgeable about these UX patterns and practices, but they also can do some coding. They usually tend to be experts in HTML and CSS. They're very knowledgeable about semantic and accessible markup and different approaches to managing large amounts of CSS. They may be working on the design system that is used. The designers may design a design system, and then they may actually write and codify that design system in code. Front end can vary a ton. You could be someone who just works on a CMS, and all you do is just pick the WordPress template and install it, and you manage the WordPress site and the content on it. Or you could be a step up of that and actually designing your own WordPress templates. Or it could be entirely doing all of that HTML and CSS stuff we were talking about a moment ago, and mainly focusing more on that side of things, of the design aspect of it. Or you could do what I do, which is do 95% of my job is JavaScript, where I am doing all of the application logic on the front end and creating components and doing all of the plumbing to connect the front end to the data in the back end by hitting REST routes or a GraphQL database or something like that. So that's the front end side of things. Middle tier is something you don't really see listed a lot. This is something you only really see at really big companies. But these are people who just write the routes. They may just, all their job is writing a REST route to document that route and to get the correct data to the front end properly, and to write the SQL commands to get the data from the database or whatever. Backend is a very general term. Generally, backend includes middle tier, which is why from DevOps all the way up to here, it's all kind of different shades of purple. So kind of all of this can be called backend, depending on where you're at, how big of a shop you work at. The backend people are the ones who are creating the databases and the tables in those databases, and joining those tables, and writing the routes, and optimizing things, and trying to genericize routes so they work in a consistent, predictable way, and documenting what those routes are. The DBA is usually someone who they're a database administrator. They're usually more knowledgeable on databases specifically and how to interact with databases. They should be experts on security and performance. At some companies, you have middle tier developers who are just writing the routes, and then you have DBAs who are reviewing their code to make sure that they meet all the security best practices, and pointing out, hey, you need to change this because performance-wise, this is going to be super slow. It's going to hammer the database. We need to write the code a different way, like this or this or this, and then it'll be way more performant to get the same data. A DevOps is someone whose job it is to make everybody else, all the other people who write code, make their lives easier. So they will be dealing with the tooling and systems that make your life easier. That's where DevOps came from. You'll find that in a lot of companies, really what DevOps means is you are maintaining the servers that your code gets deployed to, and what that deployment process is, and Docker and AWS, and you'll see a lot of like cloud engineering jobs where you're just working with AWS or Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Platform, GCP. And that's really all they do all day is really deal with that stuff instead of what the job title was originally made for. But this is sort of a way to think about this stuff, is on the spectrum where you work really close to the metal and the deployment side, and then the databases, and then connecting the database stuff to the front end, and then the front end stuff, and then the design all the way up to the users. And instead of thinking this as a bunch of little dots on this line, think of it more as a big spectrum where these colors all blend together. And you can kind of slice this up in a bunch of different ways and say, you know, this is the role someone does on a team. Another way to look at this is by skill set. So you could say, okay, I'm really good at front end. I understand a little bit of how to write routes, and I understand a little bit of doing some design work with code. This is, if you read any management books, you'll see like a T skill or T employee or T user or inverted T or upside down T, something like that. And it's because of this, it looks like a T shape. It's someone who has broad general knowledge, but really deep specific knowledge in one area. In reality, what you end up is something more like this, where you're really knowledgeable in one thing and you're pretty good at something else, and you're like, you know, not really fluent, but you can communicate to other people with that stuff, and you like roughly understand kind of what I don't really know what a DBA is. DevOps is sort of like this, and I kind of know what these guys are doing, and I know the basic concepts, but like something similar to this. This is a more representative of what someone's skill set would look like. If you ever hear the term full stack, it really just means I can do 3 things. It's really means you can do backend and front end. Depending on the person, you may want to stretch this bar out to include these more heavier database things or DevOps stuff. You may want to stretch it more out to do UX things as well. But bare minimum, it means you can make a CRUD app. You can set up a backend, set up routes to hit that backend, and set up a front end to hit those routes and display stuff. And that you can create a new record from the front end, view it, modify it, and delete it. And that's basically all it means. It doesn't mean you're really good at any of these particular things. Most of the time when someone says full stack, what that means is they are a front end person who knows the bare minimum of back end to make a CRUD app, or they are a back end person who knows the bare minimum of front end to make a CRUD app. And that's why you will often see the full stack horse. Look at this adorable little guy. This is our full stack developer. You can see extremely knowledgeable and detailed about this part of the horse. And you kind of got the gist as you go forward, and then you get a little bit less confident about what's going on up here. And he's very happy. It's a very happy horse. So this is the joke in the industry is a full stack developer is really a backend developer who barely knows anything about front end, or a front end developer who barely knows anything about back end. But you will find that once full stack developer became a term in the industry, when a few people about a decade ago who had really knowledgeable skills and could do basically anything, deep knowledge in all these areas, started calling themselves that, everyone else stole the word and started marketing themselves as it. And companies played along because why would I hire a front end and a back end developer when I can buy one, get one free, right? I'll just give me a twofer. That's great. Yeah. So if you see, you'll probably see that 80% of the time, a position that is for front end or back end will be labeled as full stack. Do not let that deter you. If you are a front end developer or a back end developer, just apply for it anyways. There's tons of team makeups where they have the project itself needs a lot of front end work and very little back end. And if they have 3 front end developers and one of them can also do the back end, that one person probably can handle all the back end tickets on their own. And they could hire in another front end person and be fine. Similarly, it can go the other way where there's just a ton of back end work and very little front end. I've seen a really common thing is a project has a lot of back end work and they have like 3 or 4 back end devs and that's all they have. And they begrudgingly do the front end and they hate it. And then they hire in a junior front end dev and just say, here, you're in charge of all of the front end now. I've known many people to be in that situation as the junior front end dev, and it's always terrible because the back end people don't care at all, and they're all more experienced, and they all want to have a say, and their say is always terrible because it's not a thing they really care about or have much expertise in, and the junior dev doesn't feel confident enough to call them out on it. And so it's a terrible situation, and they don't get a lot of good mentorship either in the field that they're interested in. So not a great area, but again, if it's your first dev job, take whatever you can get. If someone's going to take the risk on you, just let them take that risk. You take that job. Doesn't matter how bad it sucks. Your manager's a jerk. Doesn't matter. Work there for a year and you're set for life. You no longer at risk. You can work anywhere else after that point. So yeah, these are the roles we looked over earlier and the fields. So I can come back to these slides. If people have specific questions over these, I can pull these slides up and leave them up for people to read over and ask specific questions. Because there are some data sciencey people, I threw in this slide. I blatantly stole it from a Google search. It looks pretty decent as a quick explanation of different roles. I'm not going to go over that. This is also a really nice chart showing from independent, being independent to being more team-based or being less people-focused or strong people skills, and kind of where different roles land on this. There is a really long freeCodeCamp article that this picture is from that goes into great detail. And if you're really struggling finding a direction you want to go in for your career or what kind of role you want to have, I would recommend reading that article, or at least skimming through the sections that are relevant to you. So we're going to do questions and group discussions now. We're going to take questions from people. This is the URL, tinyurl.com/fcci-career-advice. FCCI stands for freeCodeCamp Indy. So there it is, tinyurl.com/fcci-career-advice. I got some resource links here at the end. Ugly truth about being a self-taught programmer. It kind of dispels a lot of the glamour you see about programmers and what the programming life is like, especially for self-taught people. It's a good video. Find what motivates you. Good blog post that explains different types of motivation. If you're a person who struggles to even start or keep working on a project, learn what motivates you. Is it helping other people? If so, work on a project for a friend. You know, that kind of stuff. Find what motivates you and use that to get you to work on your projects. The getting started in web dev post I put at the very front of this is there. The alt path career guide we just saw on the previous slide, that image, and finishing the projects you start is another talk I give, and I wrote out the whole thing in great detail as a blog post if you want to get the rest of that talk basically that I gave you a small sample of tonight. So yeah, if you go to these slides, there may even be some secret slides at the end. Ooh. But yeah, I'll take any questions that people have specifically. If there's any stuff on.
Please put the questions in the chat.
Yes, yeah. I have chat. I have my computer muted, so type your stuff into chat. Anya will read your questions to me. Does anyone here in person have any questions for tonight? We went over a ton of stuff. Questions? I got anyone?
You know how you said in the resume part for education?
Yeah.
It's not related to the job you're applying. It's still work too.
For anyone who didn't hear that, the question was around the education part of your resume. I want to know if you dropped out of school in 8th grade, right? I want to know, did you finish high school or did you get your GED? I want to know, did you at least do some college before dropping out? Or did you get an associate's or a bachelor's? Or are you a freaking doctor? Did you go to law school? You went to Harvard Law and you're trying to become a programmer now? That's super impressive. I'm gonna bring you in for an interview just to meet you, right? I just need to know what you achieved. If there is something really relevant, you can put that in there in more detail. I do not want to see your learning resources. I don't want to see what tutorial you did or that you used freeCodeCamp. I don't care. If you did that and you got a certificate and you want to put your freeCodeCamp certificate in, that's fine. If you did a nano degree or anything where you put time in and you got a thing at the end saying you finished it, that's fine. You can put certificates or nano degrees or anything like that. The only thing that you can start and not finish that I care about is if you were in college and you took comp sci classes and you completed those semesters, but you didn't get your degree, you dropped out of college, you at least have some comp sci education in that you did through formal education. That's fine. You can say you studied comp sci in college for these years. You don't need to put your degree on there because you didn't get one. That's fine. Just that's relevant. But otherwise, only put stuff that you actually finished and got some notification for. And then if you have anything relevant, especially if you're just getting out of school, that's really, you have to lean hard on that. So if you're like, I was president of the computer science club at school. Okay, cool. Yeah, or this is my GPA. I got 3.8. That's great. That's really good. You're smart. You know, so lean into those things. Questions?
Okay. First question. Can you share what the difference is between a web developer and web engineer?
Can you share the difference between a web developer and a web engineer? Sure. So I am a front-end developer, and I took a job as a, quote, UI engineer. It kind of varies from place to place. Job titles are really dumb, and places have different job titles all the time. A lot of the time, I've been told by someone in HR, they give them stupid names to see if you customize your resume. So I put UI engineer on my resume when I applied there. That's when I worked at Salesforce. I got hired there. So I don't think that single data point worked in my favor, but it didn't hurt. When it comes to web, there's a lot of fundamental knowledge that you need to have. And that can be knowledge around the browser itself. That can be knowledge around specific languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Each of those, don't let anyone tell you different. Each of those takes a decade to master. I spent 10 years just doing CSS and HTML. I am definitely more experienced than almost anyone else I meet in the industry. Very rarely do you find people who put in that much time into those languages. And all of them require that much effort to get good at. So when it comes to the development side of things, being a web developer versus a web engineer, engineer tends to imply that you have engineering knowledge around bigger patterns for building applications and software. Whereas a web developer, you just may know how to make a website really well, and you may know a lot of knowledge around how to optimize things to the medium of the web and why you do those things. Whereas an engineer would have more knowledge around design patterns for software development, of how to pass data around correctly, and how to architect a large scale software project and genericize it. So those are the patterns that you learn around those areas are really more engineering specific. Don't let any of that scare you though. You can learn all this stuff. It's all free, it's all available. Question?
What languages should you include in a portfolio, and how many languages should you include?
So we're looking at a bunch of different roles here, right? If you want to go into mobile, become a mobile app developer, there's a lot of languages you can pick from, right? You can, if you want to do back-end development, there's a lot of languages you can pick from. If you want to do front-end, you're much more limited, right? You have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then things that can turn themselves into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So meta languages like Sass or TypeScript or CoffeeScript or Pug or Haml or Markdown, those kind of things. But they all turn themselves back into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it depends on the role that you're looking for. If you're doing mobile, then knowing for iOS, knowing Swift or Objective-C is useful. For Android, knowing Kotlin or Java is useful for the native apps. Or you can use something like React Native or Native Script View or something like that, where you write it in JavaScript and it's a cross-platform. It builds for Android and iOS. There's just a lot of different cross-platform tools out there that you can use for mobile devices. So it really depends. There's no correct answer. It's not really about the number of languages. You should definitely look, if we go back to let's go flying back to the slides here. Yeah. When you are listing stuff here, the order that you list things in your technical skills should be based on competency and relevance. So how confident are you in that technology, and how relevant is it to the specific role? If I'm applying for a position that it would be doing Angular, I would probably move Angular up to the frontier because that's relevant to that job I'm applying for. If I'm applying for a job doing Python, I would hopefully put Python up to the very front unless I've barely touched it and I'm super knowledgeable about a different language, but I've barely touched Python, and I want to let them know, hey, I've used it, but I'm more confident in these other tools, right? You can also throw things on here that you've heard that they use. So if you hear a library that they use at work, you can just throw that library on there. Libraries are really easy to pick up really quickly. So like Lodash or DateFNS, really common. A lot of places use them. You can learn them in like a day, literally like 5 minutes, some of these things. So you don't really have to put a lot of effort into those. But like a framework, you'd spend a lot more time on, and a programming language, you spend way more time on. So level of confidence should scale based off of how much effort it takes to get good at something. I hope that answers the question. You got another one?
Should you use GitHub for your portfolio?
Should you use GitHub for your portfolio? Yeah, most people do. You can create a repo that is whatever your username is on GitHub. You do username.github.io. So in my case, jaredwilcurt.github.io, and I can put an indexed HTML file in there. I can host a static web page, and I can put my site up there. It's free, hosted for free. You've got a decent URL. You can buy a domain name for it if you want to, but you really don't have to. For your portfolio, especially as a programmer, having it listed as github.io looks perfectly fine. It lets me know what your username is, and I can go to your GitHub directly, even without looking at even without going to your page. If I just see it on your resume, I already know github.com/your username, and I can see your stuff from there. So also, if you don't want to make a portfolio, you don't have to. Your GitHub profile, you can pin projects. It has up to 6 projects you can pin. So just pick your best 3 or 4 projects and pin them, and put that in your at the top of your resume, and that acts as your portfolio. You can even add in a little README at the top of your GitHub account. Let me pull mine up real quick so you guys can see an example. GitHub.com/me. Yeah, so I created a repo that is the same as my username, and I put a README in it, and it shows up here at the top. So I can list those technical skills here. I'm available for talks on all of these subjects. You can also find me at these other links. And then I have a little GitHub stats thing, which isn't loading for some reason, but cool. And then underneath that, my pinned repos. So this right here could work as a portfolio all on its own. There's my little stats link. I don't know why that didn't load in. There it is. But yeah, you don't need to do anything this fancy. You could literally just put the bulleted list of your skills and stuff here. You don't even need to have this up here. You can just have your pinned repos. But yeah, totally fine to host your portfolio on GitHub. You honestly don't even need a portfolio nowadays. You can just use GitHub as your portfolio because it functionally acts as that. Cool.
What's the best way to build a network and ask for advice, help, or career opportunities?
What's the best way to build your network and ask for advice and career opportunities and
Ask for advice, get help, or
okay, ask for advice, get help, and career opportunities. It used to be you could just look for the meetups nearby and just go to every meetup. I used to go to like 12 meetups a month. Like I knew everybody in town. I knew the whole community. I had a really strong network. Nowadays, y'all are staying at home and visiting this remotely. So it's a little bit harder. You can still find those local communities and join their Slack, their Discord, their Gitter, whatever they use for chat. You can also find, more general, broad communities. The JavaScript community specifically has all adopted Discord. Vue.js, their official chat room is on Discord. React.js, their official chat room is on Discord. There's a Speak.js Discord, which is really big and popular. It's very general. It's not promoting anything specific, but they answer everything there. There's a CSS for there's a CSS one as well that's based on a subreddit. But yeah, there's a bunch of ways you can find those communities online. There are Reddit communities, there are Discord communities, there are people on YouTube and Twitch, and you can find these personalities who do coding tutorials and stuff, and they generally have their own communities. And these are all places you can go and find stuff to get help and to learn and to make friends and stuff, and find that network of people who can encourage you to keep coding. When it comes to career opportunities, you really want to be in those local chat rooms. So find local groups, and whenever there's a job posting, you'll find that. Here in Indianapolis, we've got several local groups. There's the Indy Hackers group, and they have their own job board here in Indianapolis. So you want to find stuff like that. Indy Hackers job board. Yeah, so boom, you'll find job posting, local job postings here. These are all, just like with any job posting, they're mainly going to be looking for senior developers. Everybody wants senior developers. No one wants to hire junior devs. It's like they don't know where seniors come from. We need to be wrapping up here and packing up. One more question. We got one more.
Are platforms important on a resume?
Are platforms important on a resume? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by platforms. If that person wants to add in some examples, platforms to me could be Windows, Linux, and OS X. A platform could be Android and iOS. A platform could be Firebase or Heroku. Platform can mean a lot of things. It's a very general term. But I will say that if it's a technology that is relevant, put it on your resume. If you've got familiarity with it, put it in that technical skills section. But yeah, that's a good final question there. Anyone local in the room got any questions specific? Cool. Okay, I'm getting some head shakes. Thanks for coming out, everybody.
Thanks for watching this video. We'll be uploading more throughout the year, featuring other local speakers, so be sure to subscribe to see more. If you know someone who would benefit from this video, please share it with them. And feel free to reach out to freeCodeCamp Indy if you'd like to speak at one of our future events. Thanks again.